Hello and welcome to this edition of our Hilltoppers at Work webinars. I'm Anthony McAdoo, Executive Director of the WKU Alumni Association. It's my pleasure to welcome you to our newest webinar series titled Working Together, Hosting a Hilltopper Intern. Bringing this series to our WKU alumni and friends is made possible through a partnership with the Gordon Ford College of Business and the Ogden College of Science Engineering at WKU. Today's webinar, Building a Virtual Internship Experience, is the second edition of our four-part series on internship programs. In our first edition, we covered what it takes to create and support an internship program for your business. Today, we'll focus on how to make an internship a virtual experience if needed to adjust our current travel operating restrictions facing businesses and our students, or to simply create a flexible internship opportunity for a student in the future. Back to help us with the discussion, I'm pleased to be joined by two fellow WKU colleagues who work to connect students and employers through internship programs in both of our partner college. First, I'd like to welcome Monica Duvall, Internship Coordinator with the Gordon Ford College of Business. And joining Monica is Liz Fogel, Internship Coordinator for the Ogden College of Science and Engineering. Monica and Liz, thank you for taking time to help our alumni and friends understand how they can create a transition an internship into our virtual one today. So after our previous discussion on internships 101, can you tell our viewers what a virtual internship entails and how it is different than one that is face-to-face?
Yeah, thanks so much for having us again and giving us this platform. So a virtual internship is really, it's not a new thing, but it's definitely something that's kind of at the forefront of people's minds right now. It can be done remotely or online any time of year, and it really gives a student the ability to either, work on a global scale or stay local if necessary. Virtual internships, much like in-person internships, need to be carefully crafted with goals, policies, and clear written plans. And if you have questions about that, I would encourage you to watch the first webinar series on Internship 101 that we did previously. So what we're going to do today is we're going to kind of unpack five different steps to kind of look at a virtual internships. We're really not asking you to reinvent anything at your company. We just kind of want you to start looking at things and thinking, could this work for my company? So kind of the first one is adapt existing resources. If you have an internship handbook, welcome packet, onboarding procedures, things like that, it's important you can adapt those. Also, a big thing for that is what kind of software is the intern going to be using it? How are they going to have access to it? Are they using a company computer? Are they using their own laptop? And clearly defining those expectations along the way. And so those are just some things to think about, before you move forward. Also, a written plan. We talked a lot about that in our first series. Interns are not going to have everyday interactions at the workplace. Creating a plan with outlines and tasks and deadlines, one that really covers the entire experience, is going to be really, really important, because that's going to allow the intern to manage themselves effectively, because essentially they're going to be, in some ways just working on their own. And you want to be able to, they want to know, what do they need to accomplish? What do they need to do? And that's part of that plan. And I'm going to turn it over to Monica, and she's going to talk about the two additional steps to just kind of think about as you're thinking about a virtual internship.
Thanks, Liz. So yeah, if you want to go to the next slide, Liz, awesome, thank you. So virtual engagement is really important. So while we talked on Tuesday in the first webinar about engaging the intern, making them feel like they are a part of the team, you really have to think about how can you then engage the intern when they are virtual. So really thinking about not micromanaging an intern, but thinking about how can you communicate with them. When an intern is face-to-face, they get to come in and talk to people and get to know people within the organization. They don't get that as much in a virtual internship unless you really make a point to make sure that they really can have a way to engage. So think about how they can have that daily contact with someone within the organization. The other thing to think about is many of you host lunch and learns or networking sessions when an intern is face-to-face. So how can you change those to a coffee hour or an online networking session to where the intern is able to continue to learn and network with not only other interns within the organization, but also other colleagues that work for the organization. So really thinking about how can you include them on virtual webinars and virtual calls and meetings. And if you would include them on a meeting that's in the office, then you need to think about how you can include them virtually within those meetings as well. So getting creative on that engagement is really important, making them feel like they're a part of the team, even though they're not coming into the office every day and having that one-on-one communication with the team. The other thing is really making sure that you continue to make it mutually beneficial for the organization as well as the intern. So while an intern's coming in to get experience, build their resume, maybe potentially become a full-time employee for you someday, really think about how you can continue to make sure that the experience is great for them, but it's also giving you back meaningful project work and that you're getting something out of them. So one thing is professional development. So how can you make professional development look a little bit differently? Is that engaging a employee within the organization who's great at being a mentor? Can they lead a professional development seminar for the intern? Or do you already have professional development seminars ongoing within the organization that you can include the intern in? So it's just really about being creative, reworking how you would do a face-to-face intern virtually, and then continuing on down that path.
So Monica and Liz, before we move on, I mean, it sounds like, right now, a lot of us have gotten used to this concept of working remotely. And, I think some individuals were pretty adept at it before, but now a lot of us have experienced this due to COVID-19. So, from your own personal perspective, as you think about your relationship with your boss or your employer, are there any things that you thought have stood out as part of that engagement that you would recommend that an employer consider as part of hosting an internship this way?
So for us, I think there were some things initially, coming home, it's like, well, how are we going to interact with each other? And we're going to hit on some of these things in probably the next couple slides. But for me, for making me come home and work effectively, communication has been the biggest part of this. Communicating goals, communicating expectations, having that open line of communication, whether that is having cell phones, texting, having these virtual experiences, because when before you could, run down the hall and have a face-to-face conversation with somebody, it doesn't happen. And so I think that has been one of the biggest successes that I have seen, is just the open flow of communication has made transitioning to online much easier. I mean, there are some things we've had to overcome with the online experience, but I think that is what has set me personally apart about making a virtual experience successful.
Another thing that to really think about with interns, and I've had some current interns tell me that this has helped them, is just, and it helps us all on a day-to-day basis, is really having the task lined out. So making sure, and we'll talk about this in another slide, but making sure that the intern understands what's expected of them, just as they would in a face-to-face setting. But we all know that when we're in a face-to-face setting, we tend to have those one-on-one communications that alert us that, oh, we should do this, or you think about it because you're in conversation. So really lining out the task for the intern, letting them know what's expected of them, and not 100% leaving them to find those tasks for themselves.
So we kind of move on, and, just thinking about my own personal experience, having supervised a remote employee before. And, I'd say, the key thing that I took away from that experience was kind of intentionality of like being very like, okay, we're going to check in via Skype, video chat, 8:30 every morning. And it's not because I don't trust that you're not sitting at your desk at 8:30. It's just so that we have that time so that we can see each other, but to also give you that time to know that, hey, if you've got questions that, we didn't have a chance to bump into each other yesterday and ask, that's your time to kind of say, hey, here's something that I was working on yesterday that I kind of hit a roadblock on. Can you help walk me through that? So But that's definitely one that I found myself to be a benefit in that. So, kind of along that line, as we think about once an employer has decided to offer such an internship opportunity virtually, what are some of the best practices that you could share with the audience that you found in your experience and research?
So these are just kind of some of the things that I found and have experienced. Flexibility is really key right now. Be considerate. Our students, a lot of our students had to pack up and go home. Have some flexibility and be considerate of that. You're not sure what some of the technology situations there are or internet situations. I know personally at my house, it is, we had to upgrade our internet, and we were fortunate to be able to do that. But it's just, there's been some stresses from our students. And so just be flexible. Right now. Also, we talked about communication. Communication is huge right now. They need to know who they can turn to in a virtual internship to ask those questions. And that's the same thing whether it's an in-person internship or a virtual internship. They need to know who do they go to if they have a question, about certain things. It is crucial to their success, because you don't want your intern to feel like they're alone, and they're confused, and you want to encourage them to ask questions and to get answers to those questions so they can be more effective. Also, be aware of biases and blind spots. In the world of recruiting right now, in the world of virtual interviews, not everything comes through, body language and certain things like that. And engage students with warmth and understanding. Also, stress-free recruitment. That is very, very key, whether it's a virtual or a in-person, internship. Clear job description. Utilize the resources available here at the university. Monica and I are happy to help you when you're recruiting for your virtual internship, because we're still in constant contact with students every day. We have resources that we can help you, and we want to help you, and also perfecting your virtual interview platform, however that is, and just clear timelines, because students want to know, like, am I interviewing for a position that's going to be hired in the fall, or is it going to be hired, whenever that is, because that just will help with some of the stress that some of the students are experiencing right now in this COVID-19 world. But just in general, I get a lot of students that go, oh, do I follow up? Do I not follow up? And just, what do I do? I had this interview and I don't know what to do. And so, Monica, and I don't want to speak for Monica, but we talk them through some of the process, and there is a learning curve for this, and it's all part of the learning process, which is great. And also just fostering company relationships. And Monica talked a lot about that, and that is helping them make connections in the company if they're not on site day to day. Do you have virtual tours of your facilities if they're working in facilities that they can see? Do you have individuals you can pair them with, that you can have your lunch and learns? Just supporting them during this time so they can more effectively support your company. So it's really a win-win for both. But it's also important. There's a couple of things as you're going through this situations to watch out for. These are in no way all of the situations to watch out for, but how are you going to overcome the lack of in-person relationship building, and the immersion in the culture? And that's something to think about as you're transitioning to a virtual internship. Are there ways you can help with that? How are you going to support the soft skill development of the interns? That is key for interns. They're trying to get experience, but they're also learning workforce practices. They're learning how to, engage in maybe an office setting or a manufacturing setting or a lab setting. They're learning those things. They're students. They want to learn. I always tell them, we want you to make your mistakes while you're still in school, so we can teach you through those, and we can teach you through those in your internship. So how are we going to overcome some of those things, through professional development? And also, this is a key. Internships are often, a road to full-time employment. So how does a virtual internship fit into your future needs? And so those are just some things to kind of, watch out for. Like I said, not all of the things to watch out for, but just kind of really some of those things that are at the forefront of kind of what's going on when you transition from an in-person to an online internship. And Anthony, before we move on, any questions we need to hit before we move on?
So just a reminder, if you do have questions for Liz or Monica, to feel free to add those to chat, and not really questions, but some kind of additional insight added from Angela in terms of kind of the appreciation for strong communication being the key here. It's essential pretty much in any internship experience, face-to-face, but especially once you transition to a virtual one. And one thing that Angela also noted was, it's often a benefit to kind of make sure that the student, the intern, and the employer also has some clear instruction on channel of communication. Because as we think about multi-generational workforces, some of us are old-fashioned and like phone calls, and some prefer to communicate via text, Skype, whatever the tool may be. And I think that kind of goes back to the point that you raised, Liz, about culture. What is the culture of the organization that they're coming into, so that the student can kind of understand that, hey, this is how you access the team, because we're all using Skype to communicate because this is our chosen tool. So it's important for you to kind of learn that tool and join us. Not to say that you can't follow up with a text or a phone call or whatnot.
Yeah, and that's correct. I mean, every company uses something different. We use Zoom. I know other companies are using Microsoft platforms. It's just clarity of what that software is, clarity of what the channel is just really, really important. And we are dealing with multi-generational things right now, and how people communicate is different. It's just, those are just all things to think about. So that is a great point.
Mm-hmm. And part of culture too that I'd kind of add of, we think about onboarding a new employee, and that's essentially what we're doing with a new intern, and especially in a virtual environment. You have to be very intentional about kind of helping them understand both the company, the culture, but also the people. And so how can we, both create team opportunities, whatever team that they're working with, whether that be personality profiles. That's as we talk about multi-generational, working with different personalities, of knowing that there are different personality types depending upon the company or organization, and helping the student understand that, this is part of how they can, prepare for their opportunity to enter the workforce professionally. So, I guess the burning question, Monica and Liz, and the focus of today. So why is hiring a virtual intern a good idea for a company?
Well, one of the coolest things about hiring a virtual intern from my perspective is that an intern is accessible whenever. So it doesn't just have to be right now when most everyone's working virtually that you hire a virtual intern. It could be anytime, all the time. So whether your company is in California or in Bowling Green or across the world, you can have access to a student if you hire them virtually on an ongoing basis. So we talked about in the previous webinar about students who are face-to-face and then they go virtual, and when they come back to campus, and that happens a lot already. So thinking about what's going to fit for the employer's needs and how maybe a virtual intern works all the time. And then it creates a great talent pipeline. So Liz spoke a little bit earlier about how when students are home working virtually, they really are working very independently. So what skill sets are you finding out about the intern while they're working virtually? And how does that then create a pipeline for your full-time employees down the road? So virtual interns can do that, as well as the face-to-face internship too. But helping with projects, a lot of us know that our worlds were turned upside down recently, and there were some projects that were put aside. So right now specifically, but also all the time, is there just a specific project that you could use a virtual intern for to really benefit your company? So, thinking about what those projects are and how the intern could help you with that. When it comes to leadership opportunities, this is really good for young of an organization that are really interested in showing their leadership skills. So how can a young employee of yours that really isn't ready for a management position yet, but really does have the leadership qualities, how can they lead that intern and show the company exactly what their leadership and management skills are? And then last but not least, mentoring students. WKU alumni are great for recruiting students into full-time positions, internship positions. They want to give back. They want to continue to hire Hilltoppers. One thing that I know that we hear a lot in the College of Business, and I'm sure that Liz hears it as well in Ogden, is we get calls from employers saying, we've hired a lot of Hilltoppers and we want to keep hiring them. Can we sign up for your career fair? So virtual internships is a great way for Hilltoppers to give back to Hilltoppers by hiring a virtual intern because of the accessibility factor, as it does not matter where their organization is located, they can always hire a virtual intern.
So are virtual internship options available for every major across campus, or do certain programs and majors and positions lend themselves to being in a virtual format versus some maybe more hands-on technical type of internships?
So I would love to say the easy answer to this is yes, it works for every major across campus, but it doesn't in reality. And we know that, but it's one of those things right now is we're thinking outside the box. And a virtual internship may not be a right fit for your organization, but it may be a great temporary fit or something you can put in long term. And as you're thinking about the new virtual world we kind of live in. But some of the things to kind of think about, do you have data that needs to be analyzed? Do you have marketing students that can work on campaigns from home? Do you have design work that needs to be updated? It really is going to depend major to major, in a lot of the science fields. If you're working in a lab, you've got to go work in a lab. If you're working in manufacturing, you've got to be there on site. But that's not to say that maybe you do have a project that's been on the back burner and you need some brain power behind it with a student that can do some analyzing, that can do some data analysis, that can do some design work. So it is possible. Like I said, I'm not going to say it's a perfect fit for every major across campus, but what I would encourage companies to do is to think about what your current needs are. Think about those projects that have been put on the back burner. Think about where you're going, kind of long term. And does a virtual intern fit within this? Do you have a problem or a task that needs to be solved? And can a Hilltopper intern help with that?
So are employers required to provide virtual internships with the equipment that they need, or can it be kind of more of a hybrid format to where the intern, knows up front that they need to bring some equipment like their laptop or their phone to the equation?
So from what I'm seeing is that it's not a requirement. So what I encourage, I know, is that if an employer is wanting to hire a virtual intern, that they at least lay it out in the job description for the student. So if they're going to be required to have their own laptop, if they're going to be required to have internet access, lay that out so that the student is aware. Because if they don't have that, most of them do, but if they don't, then they hopefully won't apply for that. If their computer needs to have certain software, maybe it doesn't have to already be downloaded, but it has to be able to be downloaded on there. So the student should know whether or not their computer has the capability for that software to be downloaded or not. So laying it out with the intern, whether it's in the job description or whether it's a question that the employer asks in the interview, is perfectly fine. It's not a requirement. Do some virtual interns have company equipment? Yes. I've had students that have come back from face-to-face summer internships for the fall, and they've got a laptop of the companies that directs them right into the company server, and they work just as if they were at the organization in their cubicle there, but they're back at campus in class. So it's really up to the employer. They just need to make sure that there's another communication time, that the employer needs to communicate that to the intern, what's expected of them, what are they going to have, what are they going to supply for them. And then that way the intern can decide if this is something they want to apply for, or do they want to even continue on in the interview process if they don't have the equipment that they're going to need.
Gotcha. So, and kind of back to as you think about design and what the student will be working on, it sounds like too, there's some regulatory things that sometimes have to be taken into consideration, whether that's, dealing with health information and HIPAA laws that may have some application that, working with one's general counsel, I think would be a good recommendation so that they can understand what's possible. And then typically payment, PCI, credit card, data compliance issues, but sometimes there's often a workaround too. And I think that's the nice part that we've all experienced is we've been forced into innovation so that we have always kind of traditionally fallen into, I know we have sometimes as well as an organization of, well, that's a limitation of PCI data compliance and we can never do, processing off site. Well, that remains true, but what we found is that maybe if you take the actual processing part out of the equation and do that on site, what else could then be done off site? And so that has allowed us to stay compliant with regulatory requirements, but also prevent it to where we had to have everyone working in the office. And I think that would apply to an internship experience as well. And being creative and thinking of new things for them to work on. I've had a couple of those conversations with students that have been employees in our office here in the Alumni Association. One's an international student. She cannot go home right now. Her country's borders are sealed off. She's staying with friends in another state, and she just worked with us on alumni engagement, but her major is broadcast journalism. So now we're working on that conversation of, well, what would we need to change about what you're doing for us to consider this an internship for your major, in its pursuit. And so I think it's just that think differently is probably one of my key takeaways of just, don't think of your traditional model. And I think that's the nice part that I've enjoyed about having both of you and really kind of approaching this from you've never had interns before. Because if that's the case, then you're not, naturally kind of going into that way of thinking of this is the way we've always done it. So is it too late for summer 2020 if someone wanted to say, hey, I recognize that our students might have an internship opportunity that they were planning on that it's no longer there, so what advice would you give to our participants today about, in the short term, how could you create, take what you've learned here and really what kind of timeline would you recommend that they consider to bring one on for 2020?
It is not too late. We still, I know we still have students looking for them. I know Gordon Ford still has students looking for internships because we've had several students that they were paused due to the current COVID-19 situation, or they were delayed. A lot of students sometimes don't even start internships till the 1st of June. So we've got a couple weeks to kind of get descriptions in order. Maybe you can start putting a plan together, thinking about, what would a virtual internship look like for your organization and for your company. So it's definitely something that I know it is still possible. And you can utilize the resources at the university we can help you through this process. We have helped with internship descriptions and we have platforms that we use to share information. I think I had 3 or 4 students reach out to me today that internships had been held, because of COVID-19, and they were still looking for opportunities. So it is one of those, it is not too late. We are always looking for ways to partner with people for our students and companies to partner with.
That's advice I think that Liz and I can give employers who are still thinking of hiring an intern is to go ahead and get set up on Handshake. And then work with us, work with your organization on what the plan is going to look like, what the job description is going to be. And then that way, once you get that plan in place, you're already set up on Handshake, and then you can get it posted and we can advertise that for you. And as we mentioned on the call on Tuesday, if you are needing an intern and that intern is not in the College of Business or not in Ogden College, we're happy to connect you across campus with the other individuals that do work with interns. And that way you can make sure you're working within that major and that those faculty members and those coordinators can make sure and advertise that out to students and get you applicants.
Well, Monica and Liz, we thank you both. No additional questions have come in. I think you all have done a great job of kind of taking what we learned in our previous session and laying it out of really to think about this. We have identified a couple of different articles that have appeared, both one through Handshake and another one in USA Today about actually Humana here in Louisville and what they've done with their summer internship programs that we'll make available on the resources page of this webinar after the fact, and remind everyone that, to take Monica and Liz up on their offer. If you don't know where to start at the university, start with them. They're well connected on campus. And if it's not a college of business or a science and engineering internship opportunity, they'll know where to get you directed. So thank you, everyone, for joining us today. And we look forward to having you join us for our third edition, where we'll actually have employers who have hosted internship opportunities before join us and talk about internships from their perspective. So maybe for those who have not actually had the internship responsibility before, it'll be a great opportunity to directly interact with some of our individuals that have. And then our fourth and final edition in this series, we'll actually have some students, both in current internships and who have benefited from internships, talk about their experience. So as you think about kind of the entire package, both virtual and just the actual internship opportunity, you can round that out. So thank you once again for joining us. Thank you for your time, Monica and Liz, and everything you do to connect our students and employers on campus.